Good evening and welcome to the 2022 Minnesota Senate District 54 Candidates Forum, sponsored by the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau. Tonight we're gathered at River Valley Church. My name is Michael Clem. I'm an attorney at the law firm of Helmuth & Johnson and a member of the Chamber, and I will serve as the moderator. All candidates for Minnesota Senate District 54 were invited to participate. With us this evening are Alicia Donahue and Senator Eric Pratt. The candidates are arranged in alphabetical order. The candidates have already recorded video interviews to introduce themselves to the community, and we encourage you to view those on the Shakopee Chamber website. I encourage you to watch those videos rather than doing opening statements tonight. The candidates will be asked a series of questions. They will have 60 seconds to respond to each question. They also have 4 opportunities to make rebuttal comments for 30 seconds. The first question will be going to Ms. Donahue. What is the role of state government?
Thank you so much, and thank you to the Chamber for having me and to Senator Eric Pratt for being here. I believe the role of state government is to uplift and amplify the voices of its citizens and do no harm, to support its citizens in some of their hardest and darkest moments, and to ensure that our streets are safe and folks have a roof over their head and food on their table.
Senator Pratt, what is the role of state government?
Well, thank you, and thank the Shakopee Chamber for having us tonight. The role of state government is really to act as that independent laboratory of democracy. It's for us to represent our citizens and what they need and really help them be successful to achieve the American dream. Our Constitution lays out some of the things that we have to do. I agree with Ms. Donahue in that we want to have our safe streets, and I'm proud to be endorsed by the Police and Peace Officers Association. I've worked on the Prior Lake School Board to help our kids get a quality education, and I want to make sure that we have an economy that works for all Minnesotans. Whether it's, one of the things about being a state senator is you don't just represent your district, but you're making decisions for people statewide. So I get to work with people in the Iron Range, in Northwest Minnesota, Southern Minnesota, farmers, manufacturers, professionals, and it's really there to make sure that we all work together and we all make this a great state.
Senator Pratt, what makes an effective legislator?
It's been interesting because ever since I've been in the legislature, I've been working in divided government. And I had a 30-year career in the corporate world working for a couple of Fortune 100 companies. And what I found is that being successful in state government and being an effective legislator isn't much different than being successful in the corporate world, and that is finding solutions to the problems that matter most and being able to work with people in order to find those solutions. I have a reputation, of being able to work across the aisle, and every one of the bills that I've passed has had a bipartisan vote and has had to be signed by a DFL governor. And so as we talk about education reform, as we talk about helping small business survive through COVID, those were all things that we had to work together on. And that's what I bring to the table, and that's what I continue to bring to state government.
Ms. Donahue, what makes an effective legislator?
An effective legislator is someone who listens and puts service to others above self-interest. We've watched these last several years as our politics have become more and more divisive. I appreciate the work that Senator Eric Pratt has done in the legislature, and I'm disappointed at other things, such as walking away from $4 billion in tax cuts, $1 billion for public schools, and $450 million for public safety. It is absolutely crucial that we have folks in the legislature who are willing to work across the aisle and put others above themselves and above their own self-interest to ensure that we're getting things done for Minnesotans who are working hard and struggling. It's absolutely critical that we have folks in the legislature who are willing to put people over power.
The next question will be the same for both of you. Ms. Donahue, I'll ask you to answer first. And the question is, what were your greatest accomplishments during your past service in the Minnesota Senate or in your professional career?
Absolutely. So I've spent the last 18 years serving our community, working with individuals in their hardest and darkest days. I've worked with individuals with serious and persistent mental illness, chemical dependency, developmental disabilities. I've worked with our LGBTQ youth. I've worked with individuals experiencing homelessness, individuals who are incarcerated, and individuals living in group home settings. There is not an area of health and human services that I have not worked in. I am extremely proud to have been instrumental in the rollout of substituted medication treatment, such as Suboxone, at the Hennepin County Jail as a behavioral health director to help ensure that we stopped deaths by overdose for folks leaving incarceration and using heroin at the rates that they were prior. We watched as that program saved hundreds of lives before I left the jail.
Thank you. Senator Pratt, what were your greatest accomplishments during your past service in the Minnesota Senate or in your professional career?
Well, I think there have been many. And, the first one that comes to mind is dealing with COVID and the crisis that we faced. I spent a lot of time making sure that our small businesses were able to reopen and working with small businesses directly as their conduit into the governor and into the Department of Employment and Economic Development, pushing to reopen schools because we just saw MDE released a study that's saying that students are still behind. We pushed education reform and more predominantly teacher licensure reform to make sure that we took some of the politics out of teacher licensing because our kids need great teachers in the classroom. We've pushed for more transparency in education because we know that parents are an important partner. And I co-sponsored the bill that was in the final conference committee, tax committee, to eliminate the Social Security tax. And regretfully, the House of Representatives didn't do their job and sent us a tax bill.
Senator Pratt, what is your strategy to engage with constituents on a consistent basis?
I try to stay in contact with constituents, and it's funny, some of the best ideas that I've gotten for legislation have come from conversations with constituents. It's interesting, and as I reflect back, how service has changed over the years. I'm constantly thinking and revising about how I communicate with constituents. And I'm trying to open up additional channels to have those conversations. I expect to have more community forums for people to come talk to me, but certainly through Facebook, through email, I try to answer everyone's questions, and I go to a lot of community events where I believe most Scott County residents think I'm pretty accessible.
Ms. Donahue, what is your strategy to engage with constituents consistently?
My ability to connect with our community is one of my strongest assets. Having served people for the last 18 years, there is not a conversation that I am uncomfortable having. There is not a situation that I am unwilling to listen to solutions to. I have an events calendar listed on my website where folks are able to view and see what I'm up to. I believe in transparency and accountability. We already have a town hall scheduled, even though I have not even served in the Senate. We are interested in hearing from the community because, after all, as the very first question we answered was, the role of government is to uplift your voices. It's important that your state senator is accessible and available to you. That means if you call, you send an email, those need to go responded to. You need to ensure that you're working with your community and listening to the problems that they're facing, the things that are keeping them up at night, and sharing in their vision for a stronger tomorrow.
Ms. Donahue, what are the most important issues that you would like to address in this upcoming legislative session?
I'm not sure that that's a question I can successfully answer in 1 minute, but I will do my best. We need to ensure that we have accessible housing, childcare, and healthcare. We absolutely need to ensure that women have equality under the law, by becoming the 27th state to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. We need to ensure that public safety is a top priority and that we're keeping our streets safe and that we're allowing our law enforcement to address serious crimes that are impacting our community and allowing those with the skills and the resources, such as social workers, to address mental health crises. We need to ensure that our education is fully funded. We absolutely need to make sure that our students have what they need to address their mental health needs and that we are creating a strong workforce for the future.
Senator Pratt, what are the most important issues that you would like to address this next session?
You know, as I've been out talking to people, there's a few themes that continue to rise to the top. And the first one is the rising cost of inflation. Scott County residents are struggling to make ends meet as the price of basic necessities continue to go up. And yet we're the 5th most taxed district in the country. We have a record surplus, not because we have an underspending problem, but because we have an overtaxing problem. And so the first thing I would do is work on cutting taxes, that seniors no longer have to pay taxes on their Social Security benefits, and the average Scott County family gets a $1,000 tax break so that they have more money in their pockets. Working with our police officers to make sure our streets are safe. The defund the police movement has decimated the morale of our police officers, and we're having a hard time retaining and recruiting new police officers. And is one of the fastest growing areas in not only in the state, but in the country, making sure we have the infrastructure to handle that growth.
Senator Pratt, when considering an important issue, how would you resolve any differences between your personal views and the opinion of a majority of your constituents or the position of your party?
You know, that's a really good question, and it depends on the issue in many ways. You know, I grew up here. I was raised with Scott County values, and I think I have a pretty good sense of where most of the communities are on many issues. I try not to be an overly partisan legislator. I try to think about where our constituents are. I have conversations with people all the time about what's on their mind. I keep an open ear. I listen. Ultimately, you know, I rely on my experience to make the best decisions that I can. And hopefully I'm right more often than I'm wrong.
Ms. Donahue, when you're considering an important issue, how would you resolve any differences between your personal views and the opinion of a majority of your constituents or the position of your party?
As I've already spoken to, the divisiveness in our current state legislature is unlike anything that we've seen before. I hear that Senator Pratt has said that he is interested in working bipartisan issues and passing bipartisan legislation, but I have to call into question walking away from this last legislative session when there was $4 billion in tax cuts that could have helped Minnesotans when they're struggling the most. It is absolutely imperative that we have people who are listening to us and who are willing to vote the values that we hold. I heard Senator Eric Pratt say that he listens to those who he's representing and that he believes he has a pretty good idea of what matters to them. I think that's true for small business owners and for our wealthy populations. I don't think that's true for folks who are experiencing housing instability, food instability, mental health crises, and chemical dependency.
Senator Pratt, I see you'd like to rebut that.
Yeah, thank you. You know, that's twice that I've been accused of walking away from a tax cut bill, and it's just not the case. The fact of the matter is I helped co-sponsor some of the items that were in the tax bill. We came to a conference committee agreement. All tax bills have to originate in the House of Representatives. And the House of Representatives and the DFL House leadership failed to bring that bill up. So when my opponent says, I left that on the table, she's misleading the voters of Scott County, and I think it needs to be addressed.
Ms. Donahue.
Thank you. There are other bills that you have not supported that would support our community. You failed to help support and pass funding for paid family medical leave. You failed to support and pass a bill that would have supported young children in our community, that would have created thousands of more families with children under 5 an opportunity to help them grow and thrive. There are several examples, not just the bill at the end of the session.
Ms. Donahue, how should the legislature respond to the state budget surplus next year?
That's a great question. We have to ensure that public safety is a top priority. There's just no question about it. People are worried about public safety. They're worried about our streets, and we have to do something about it. We have to invest in early childhood education and ensure that our children and those who need support the most have what they need to grow and thrive. We know that adverse childhood experiences is something that if we were to even reduce by 10%, the cost savings across the United States would be $56 billion. Adverse childhood experiences are things that happen early in life that create chronic health problems later on. We have to ensure that we're investing in public safety, affordable housing, affordable childcare, paid family medical leave, and education.
Senator Pratt, how should the legislature respond to the state budget surplus next year?
Well, I mentioned the first thing already, and that is to make sure that we're not overtaxing Minnesotans for the services that they need. We already have a budget. We're going to have somewhere between $10 and $12 billion in excess money collected from Minnesota families that's sitting at the state that we need to make sure get back in the pocketbooks so that they can, pay their rent and mortgage, continue to plan for their kids' education. These are all things that the state is over collecting on. In addition, we need to look at relieving mandates. As we come out of the pandemic, we in Minnesota are poised for an economic boom, but the state government is just in the way. So we have to relieve some of those mandates around, whether it's getting licenses to people so they can get back to work. Minnesotans need to get off the bench. We're still 100,000 people shy in the workforce of where we started. And getting those people back into the workforce has got to be a top priority.
Senator Pratt, what is your view of Minnesota's economy and business competitiveness?
As you look at where we're ranked overall, whether it's CNBC or Tax Foundation or whoever, Kiplinger's, we are ranked as one of the top areas for quality of life, and we're ranked in the bottom third when it comes to business friendliness and cost of doing business. As chair of the Jobs Committee, one of the things that I focus on is making sure that Minnesota is a great place to invest, making sure that it's not just about money investment, but that people are willing to invest their time and their lives into their businesses. Bringing back angel tax credits would be one that I think would help us bring new capital, new investment to the state. Making sure that we help businesses train employees, because the number one issue I hear from employers is they can't find qualified employees. So helping them do that training themselves, relieving that burden, I think is a great option. There's a local business that does that. Someone can qualify for their journeyman's license as an electrician after 6 years of working for them.
Ms. Donahue, what is your view of Minnesota's economy and business competitiveness?
Absolutely. So I agree with some of the things that Senator Eric Pratt has said. I absolutely think we should be investing in businesses to ensure that Minnesota continues to grow and thrive and has a strong prosperity. And I heard Senator Eric Pratt say that we are short on the workforce. We know that 63% of the people who left the workforce during COVID were women. And we know that the barriers to them re-entering the workplace is affordable childcare, affordable health care. We also know that businesses need affordable housing to attract qualified employees. Those are all things that our legislature has the power to do to ensure that we have the strongest Minnesota possible.
Ms. Donahue, Minnesota's corporate income tax is the third highest in the nation, and Minnesota's top individual income tax rate is the sixth highest in the nation. Would you support lowering Minnesota's corporate income tax rate or Minnesota's individual income tax rate, or both of them?
At this point in time, I would say no. I believe that the taxes our corporations pay are necessary to ensure that they're paying their fair share. I hear that they are extremely high, and we need to ensure that hardworking people and our families are being put first and not being left behind. And that's what we see happen when we start lowering taxes for the wealthy.
Senator Pratt, to repeat, Minnesota's corporate income tax rate is the third highest in the nation, and Minnesota's top individual income tax rate is the sixth highest in the nation. Would you support lowering Minnesota's corporate and/or individual income taxes?
Well, in addition to that, our lowest tax rate is higher than the highest tax rates in 23 other states. As I mentioned, Minnesotans are overtaxed. So yes, I think we need to look at all types of tax cuts in order to bring in capital investment, in order to bring in jobs, in order to bring in great paying jobs. Because those investments are going to other states. If we want to compete, and we have to look at ourselves as competing with other states, we need to look at lowering the cost of doing business. And it's not about pitting employers against employees. I'm fortunate enough to have the support of both people in labor and certainly people in business, because we understand that they rely on each other. Employers need employees to be successful, and employees need employers to be successful. And I'm not going to get into this class warfare debate.
Senator Pratt, for the last several years, there have been proposals at the Minnesota legislature to mandate paid leave and other workplace benefits. Do you believe that the state should determine private sector workplace benefits, and why or why not?
Well, I don't believe that the state should be putting any additional mandates and getting into the relationship between employers and employees. Now, I've looked at this issue, and I actually co-sponsored a bill because what I found out was a large company could self-insure paid family and medical leave, but our small Main Street businesses didn't have access to those same policies because our state Department of Commerce and Insurance Commissioner wouldn't allow them. So rather than mandate that businesses pay an additional tax and have to provide this benefit, we've taken a different approach, and I've supported and co-sponsored legislation that would open up the Department of Commerce to allow these policies to be written and to allow employers and employees to voluntarily purchase them.
Ms. Donahue, do you believe that the state should determine private sector workplace benefits, and why or why not?
We are one of the only industrialized countries without paid family medical leave and affordable health care. It is past time for the state of Minnesota to do something to ensure the lives of our citizens are put first. I do support mandates that would address these issues because we know that our communities are struggling. We know that 1 in 5 Americans have a mental health diagnosis that will need treatment at some point in their life. We know that a large percentage of those are children. We have communities who are struggling to receive treatment because they cannot take time off of work to get the treatment that they need, and instead those symptoms and that diagnosis becomes a crisis, and we pay for it in other ways.
Ms. Donahue, what are the top issues regarding policing and public safety, and what reforms do you support?
There are several things that we can do to ensure that our streets stay safe here in Scott County. I want all of Minnesota to have the law enforcement and the first responders that we have here in Scott County. Our law enforcement is fantastic. They have all had crisis intervention training to ensure that they are responding the best that they can to mental health crises. I think that we can go one step further and ensure that we are embedding social workers in law enforcement agencies to ensure that folks with the qualifications to meet the needs of our citizens are doing just that. We're watching as our officers are leaving, and many of whom are suffering from symptoms like PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, due to the atrocities that they see every day. I think we need to invest in law enforcement, ensure that they have what they need to do the job, and we need to make sure that we're doing other things and getting creative, such as having social workers on the force to be able to address some of those issues.
Senator Pratt, in your view, what are the top issues regarding policing and public safety, and what reforms would you support?
Well, as I mentioned, the defund the police movement had a detrimental impact on the morale of our police officers. And so the first thing that we in the Senate have tried to do, and I support, is efforts to retain and recruit new police officers. We have more officers retiring and leaving the profession than new officers coming in. We have to increase penalties for repeat violent offenders. We have a revolving door going on right now where these violent offenders are getting out and reoffending in our neighborhoods. And finally, we have to increase transparency among what's happening with judges and county attorneys. There are many crimes that aren't being prosecuted, and I think the public deserves to know why.
Senator Pratt, should laws regarding the purchase of firearms be changed? And if so, what changes are needed?
You know, I don't believe that laws need to be changed right now. As I've looked at the headline shootings, many of these new laws that have been proposed, whether they're red flag rules where your rights can be eliminated without any due process, wouldn't have stopped any of these shootings. What we need to do is we need to make sure that the laws we have in place are working the way we intend them to work, that the background checks we already have in place are being done. So I sponsored legislation that would force the state or require the state to update the NICS system more timely. I've supported due process for people who are convicted of domestic violence in regards to their gun rights. But new gun control is not going to stop the violence that we see. Increased public safety is going to make our streets safer.
Ms. Donahue, in your view, should laws regarding the purchase of firearms be changed? And if so, what changes are needed?
Our children are dying at school where they should be safe. And this is coming at the hands of individuals who, if we had red flag laws and if we closed the loopholes on background checks, those guns would not get in those hands. I'm not sure what statistics Senator Eric Pratt are looking at, but we know with absolute certainty that when we pass red flag laws, which we can ensure have due process, because I agree, having worked for the Ombudsman Office protecting the rights of individuals with disabilities, I don't want to see folks lose their rights without due process. I also don't want to see a parent crying because their child was murdered at school. I don't want to see another mother or sister struggle because their partner didn't come home from the grocery store when they went to get a gallon of milk. I absolutely think we need to pass red flag laws and close loopholes on background checks.
Ms. Donahue, what is your position regarding abortion, and in what circumstances should abortion be allowed or prohibited in Minnesota?
This conversation goes beyond so much more than abortion. It is about equality for women and people with a uterus. I believe that we need to codify Roe and we need to ensure that women have access to abortion health care. I believe that we need to become the 27th state to pass the Equal Rights Amendment to ensure that women have equality under the law and cannot be denied due to gender. I believe that the decision about if or when to become a parent is deeply personal and needs to be left between an individual and their doctor, and the government needs to stay out of our uterus.
Senator Pratt, what is your position regarding abortion, and in what circumstances should abortion be allowed or prohibited in Minnesota?
Well, I've always been pro-life, and I've always supported that there should be exceptions for the health of the mother, rape and incest. But abortion isn't on the ballot. You know, I understand it's become a very hot topic these days, and I was disappointed to see that we had a judge overturn bipartisan legislation that's been standing for well over a decade that removed parental notification, removed requirements for a doctor to have admitting rights into a hospital for late-term abortions. These were all protections for women that were there to make sure that their health care was safe. Now, again, I am pro-life, but I also understand that we have a constitutional decision that's been handed down by the Supreme Court, and it can only be overturned by popular referendum.
Ms. Donahue.
I see that Senator Eric Pratt has gotten the same talking points that the rest of the Senate Republicans have gotten, that abortion is not on the ballot this year, and that is completely false. Almost every single conversation I'm having on the doors, whether it's with a woman, somebody who is non-binary, or a man, that is one of the very first things that they bring up. People are very worried about women's equality and being able to make decisions about their health care. It absolutely is on the ballot, and to say that it's not is dismissive and harmful.
Senator Pratt, what is the best way to make healthcare affordable and available to more Minnesotans?
Since the Affordable Care Act, also known as ACA or Obamacare, was passed, we saw just afterward health insurance premiums skyrocket 60-70% a year. And so we in the Minnesota Senate passed a bill that would control those rising costs. It's interesting that we talk about making sure that you have control in your healthcare decisions, and I do believe that those discussions need to happen between a patient and their doctor. But additional state involvement is not going to make sure that happens. What's going to help that is making sure that we have better communication between providers and patients. So I've supported telemedicine reform to make sure that both health and general practitioners can have those conversations, and making sure that we take the waste, fraud, and abuse out of our healthcare system. About 1/3 of every dollar can be attributed to healthcare waste, fraud, and abuse.
Ms. Donahue, what is the best way to make healthcare more affordable and available to all Minnesotans?
There are so many things that we can do both in the short term and the long term to ensure that healthcare is affordable. We can start by addressing chronic health issues at the beginning. I talked earlier about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and I talked about the cost savings that would come from addressing those things. Things such as the bill that Senator Eric Pratt voted down that would have supported children under 5 having additional support from social workers and community health workers to ensure that children have what they need at the earliest age when they're most vulnerable. We know that 45% of people in Minnesota can't afford their prescription drugs. we can institute pharmaceutical review boards to ensure that we are capping prices so that folks can get the life-saving medication that they need. We can invest in other preventative programs and measures that continue to get cut year after year after year, and then we wonder why we have chronic health issues like we do. And we can also ensure that we are investing in things such as telehealth, where we're seeing some of those fundings get cut and regulations get cut after COVID.
Ms. Donahue, do you believe that state government should address climate change? And if so, what type of measures would you support?
I do believe that we should address climate change because public institutions were created to serve people and our environment. Our government must act for the common good, and I don't know what is a more common good than our planet. There is an intergovernmental panel on climate that scientists from 195 countries, including the United States, have come together to say, here's what we need to address to ensure that emissions are lowered by 45% by 2030, and we are failing to meet that. We can transform our energy system while protecting what is precious. We can create rebates for appliances and vehicles. We can provide financial support to farmers transitioning to soil-healthy farming practices. There are so many things that we can do to address climate change, and it's past time that we start acting.
Senator Pratt, do you believe that state government should address climate change? And if so, what kind of measures would you support?
You know, when I think about this question, I think about the fact that we all want clean water, we all want clean air, but we also need affordable and reliable energy. And there are a lot of ways to get there. We have a nuclear moratorium that's not allowing us to even discuss new nuclear power plants that would provide affordable energy that would be considered clean from a carbon standard. There's new technologies coming in place all the time around carbon capture, natural gas, hydropower. In fact, I'll be on a Legislative Energy Commission review of some of these efforts going on. But mandating that Minnesotans follow California law when it comes to the purchase of automobiles or any other emission standards is not the way to go, because we are not California. We don't have the same climate and we don't have the same population. And I want to make sure that Minnesotans have access to affordable and reliable energy, that we don't have those rolling brownouts.
Senator Pratt, what changes are needed in state support for post-secondary education?
Our colleges and universities, the cost is rising at 4 times the rate of inflation. Our colleges and universities need to understand how to rein in their cost. And that's why, as we've been looking at how to improve access to post-secondary education at 4-year institutions, making sure that we're helping the students make the choice that they need and what fits them, rather than necessarily the institutions. I also think it's interesting that more and more jobs don't require a 4-year degree anymore. As we start looking at apprenticeships and internships, we're finding that there are new pathways to affordable and effective workforce training. And those are the types of solutions that I've co-sponsored and supported and will continue to support.
Ms. Donahue, what changes are needed in state support for post-secondary education?
We have to make school more affordable if we want to ensure that we have a strong workforce. We need to ensure that we're investing in trade schools and post-secondary education at the high school level. I'm somebody who attended Normandale Community College my senior year of high school. That was an option that was afforded to me. Options that are being stripped away from our students now due to budget cuts and without staffing to help support, empower, and encourage students to reach those goals. that's a problem. So we have to start with funding our public schools, focusing on trade schools, and increasing grants and scholarships available to lower socioeconomic status families who are looking for a brighter future and a stronger tomorrow and can't afford it otherwise.
Ms. Donahue, what is the most significant transportation issue that's affecting our community, and how should that be addressed at the state level?
I've spent a lot of time in Jordan this summer, which is a beautiful community that I hadn't had the privilege of spending as much time as I have recently. And we absolutely need to ensure that the 169 overpass is finalized and that there is funding and that project is underway. We have worked too hard for too long on that project to not have more movement than we currently do.
Senator Pratt, what is the most significant transportation issue facing our community, and how should that be addressed at the state level?
Well, I'm glad that the 169-282 intersection came up because I've spent a lot of time working on that, working with our federal delegation to get funding as well as locally, because it's important for the safety of our residents, but also for the commerce of Scott County. You know, one of the things as a growing area, we have a lot of infrastructure needs. And one of the proposals the Senate has put out there that is being supported by both labor and business is to dedicate sales tax on auto repairs and auto parts to fixing our crumbling infrastructure. And I think that's really important because we need to keep up. We want safe roads, we want safe bridges. You know, when I think of transportation, I also think of our supply chain. Right now, do you know it takes 3 months once a candidate passes truck driving school to get their commercial driver's license? We need to shorten that time frame and make sure that we can get these people back in the jobs and back on the road and helping to reduce the supply chain issues that we're seeing that are helping to drive up inflation.
Senator Pratt, do you support the legalization of marijuana, and why or why not?
I do not support the legalization of marijuana right now. I went to college at the University of Colorado, and I keep in contact with a lot of friends there. Here's what they tell me. Since they've passed the legalization of marijuana, homelessness is up, crime is up, traffic accidents are up. We don't have a good way to test for someone who's driving impaired on marijuana. We're just not ready for this. We want to make sure our kids don't get access to this gateway drug. Now, we know they do. We know they already have access to it, but we need to set the example. We need to make sure that we go into this knowing all of the risks that are available. It's not just about increased tax revenue. It's about making sure that we have the structure in place to keep residents safe.
Ms. Donahue, do you support the legalization of marijuana, and why or why not?
I do support the legalization of recreational use of marijuana for adults for a number of reasons. I heard Senator Eric Pratt say that he stays in touch with some friends in Colorado, which is one of the states that have passed recreational marijuana use. I can appreciate that, but what the research tells us is that property crimes are decreased when we pass recreational use of marijuana. We know that law enforcement is able to deal with more serious crimes. Research tells us that marijuana is not a gateway drug. And as somebody who served our community for 18 years, working with folks with chemical dependency, mental health, and developmental disabilities, I can affirm that I have never encountered an individual in my career that has said, I started with marijuana and now I'm using heroin. In fact, we know that it's prescription drugs that are often a gateway to heroin and opiate use.
Ms. Donahue, do you support legalization of sports betting, and why or why not?
With the support of the tribes, I would support legalization of sports betting.
And Senator Pratt, would you support the legalization of sports betting, and why or why not?
I do support legalization of sports betting. In fact, we already have sports betting here in Scott County. We have it at Canterbury Park. And what this will allow us to do is keep this activity here in the state. Right now, we've got residents going to Iowa and Wisconsin to make these bets, and we have these facilities right here. I've been in contact with the tribes. I've been in contact with the tracks, trying to make sure that we can come to an agreement on this issue. And our residents want it. It's a form of entertainment. And so as an entertainment center in the metro area, I do support legalization of sports betting.
Our time is running out. Anyone whose questions have not been answered should ask the candidates this evening after the debate or contact their campaign offices. You can find more information about the candidates at the Chamber's website, shakopee.org. Each candidate will now have 1 minute for their closing statement, and we will begin with Alicia Donahue.
Thank you so much to the Chamber for providing this opportunity. Thank you to Senator Eric Pratt for being here. And thank you to all of you in the audience and watching at home for being an engaged and informed voter. 18 years ago, I took an oath to uphold the Social Worker Code of Ethics, which calls me to empower and uplift those around me. It calls me to elevate service to others above self-interest and draw on my knowledge, values, and skills to help our neighbors and address social problems. The last several months, I've been knocking doors in every city in our community, and I can tell you that families are struggling to access affordable health care, childcare, to find baby formula, fill their gas tank, and put food on the table. We need to ensure that our state is taking every action available to them to support Minnesotans during this time of instability. I believe that all the problems we face can be solved if we work together, but that takes open dialogue, which is currently missing. I will bring this skill to the Minnesota State Senate to create positive change in our community where we put our hardworking neighbors and families first. I look forward to hearing from you, hearing what keeps you up at night, earning your vote, and I look forward to being your next Minnesota State Senator.
Senator Pratt.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank the Chamber again for hosting this event. I think it's really important for our community to hear the differences between the candidates that'll be on the ballot. You know, when I walk into the Senate chamber, there's a quote that encircles the room from Daniel Webster that talks about doing things to be remembered, doing things that are important enough to be remembered. And it reminds me that we're not there for partisan issues, that the decisions we make are important to the people that we represent and serve. So I'm running for re-election to support the issues that I'm hearing from Scott County families that are important to them. I want to help Scott County families deal with the rising cost of inflation as they're seeing their paychecks go for less and less. I want to work with our police to keep our streets safe. And I want to help our kids get a quality education and improve the infrastructure to make sure that Scott County residents are safe. I have a record of accomplishment in the state Senate in a divided government. I hope Scott County residents will appreciate that, and I hope I can earn their vote on November 8th.
As we close this part of our discussion, please remember that the views expressed in tonight's debate are those of the candidates and not those of the Chamber and Visitors Bureau. The Chamber sponsors this event as a service to the community and has gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure the objectivity of this forum. The Chamber does not endorse any candidate. Instead, we seek to provide the information that you need to make informed decisions when you vote. Thank you to the audience this evening and to River Valley Church for hosting our event. On behalf of the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau, thank you to both the candidates. We appreciate your time and your service to our community. Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th. Please remember to vote.